All right, good morning. I am so thrilled to be with you all here. I hope you've had a wonderful conference. Before we get started, can we get a round of applause for Jamie? And real quickly, could we also get a round of applause for Henry, who's been our DJ here, getting you pumped up and ready for the events. All right, so as you know, the theme today for this plenary is inspiring faith that an end to homelessness is possible. And I am so thrilled that Joe is here with us, because when we wanted to put this on first, I saw Joe speak in a session at our conference last year, and I thought if there was anyone who was ready for the main stage, it was this man. But also because I thought that there would be no one better to talk about how we can use our communications to inspire faith than a pastor, because pastors are people who live their faith. They are also professional communicators. So I am so thrilled that you're here. And also, you and I have something in common, don't we?
We actually do. And I'm glad to be here in this room of all these difference makers. And I think you ought to give yourselves a hand for the work that you do day in and day out.
So what Joe and I have in common, among other things, is that we are both lifelong fans of the Washington football team.
And we've been held hostage for these last 20 plus years. And thank God for last year. That means that hope still reigns.
What has ever tested our faith more? And that faith is being rewarded.
Yes, indeed.
We're coming for you, Philly. I'm looking at you, Ann. All right, let's get out of here. All right, so let's get to business. It often seems to me that our culture is sort of at a crisis of faith. And I don't just mean a spiritual faith. I also mean faith in the institutions that we rely on, in our government, in education, higher education. And to some extent, to a great extent, a lot of people having a crisis of faith in our mission. And I wanted to hear a little bit. You had described to me in a previous conversation about how your congregation had been through a crisis and how it really forced you to reimagine your value proposition, how you communicated to the community. I was wondering if there were some lessons you might be able to share with the rest of us.
So as a nonprofit executive who also serves as a pastor, one of the things that I would tell you is that while we know that community can be in crisis, but when community is in crisis every day, it is the people who are in crisis, and having the ability to help people to look up and not keep their heads down when everything is going on. So you come out of COVID, and then you come into this kind of administration, and then you have lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. And then we have to then begin to look at how do we instill hope, maintain hope, and keep hope in the midst of a struggling moment. And I will tell you that the real help is to understand that because we are resilient people, because we have had crises before, we have to build our faith up on what we've come through and what we're going through so that we can get through and grow through to the next level of where we're supposed to be.
So that's a really kind of interesting setup to the next thing I wanted to discuss, which is, so I come from a faith tradition as well. I grew up Catholic, and one of the things that we learned in theology class is that faith and doubt are not necessarily opposite entities. They are, but to a great extent, it's the presence of doubt that builds your faith. It's overcoming that doubt that makes your faith stronger. And one of the things when we were talking, you told me about every Sunday, you have to shore up the defenses. You are working to overcome doubt. And I was wondering, once again, what you can tell us about that experience of managing your flock and keeping their faith strong, even in the presence of doubt.
And I'll even take that a step further. Pastoring and preaching every Sunday is preaching uphill. You're preaching uphill because people are coming in with the weight of the world. They're coming in with difficulty. They're coming with different things. And when they come in and they've been hearing you Sunday after Sunday, you sometimes sound like womp, 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 womp. And so preaching uphill means that you are having to make sure that you inspire people to want to worship and not just spectate. And so how do you do that? You do that by reminding them of the tenets of faith that keeps you going. For example, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So that means then that in order for you to stay inspired to do what you do day in and day out, you have to remember that sometimes you are working with what you don't see, but you know it's coming because it will always manifest itself if you keep moving forward.
I love that. You know, it occurs to me, this is kind of awkward. We've got all these chairs up here and you and I are standing.
Yeah,
why is that?
Listen, in a room like this, y'all, I can stand here for an hour and I can walk all back and forth across the stage and I can just keep moving. I can jump off the stage, jump back. No, but no, I think that it is out of my habit. I stand to teach. I stand to share. And then when Tom said, well, you know, you only have 20 minutes, I said, well, I guess that's cutting it short, but no, but that's fine.
And we are cutting it short because we're a tight plan today. But I do want to just leave room for one last thing. And that is that one more thing, everything that we're talking about are things that you told me that inspired me. You talked about the opportunity in moments of crisis to create places to build and to belong. And I'd really love to open that up and unpack that a little bit because I found that incredibly inspirational at a time where there is a lack of faith sometimes, when the time when there are doubts and a time when there is alienation. What can you tell us about building those communities to build and belong?
Yeah, so at Enterprise, we have a basic thrust, that is the preservation and production of affordable housing. Our efforts day in and day out across our whole 11 markets is to make sure that we are finding opportunities where we can engage community and to shore up and strengthen communities through our mission. Now, the work that I do is I lead our faith-based development initiative work. What that means is that I train houses of worship on how to put together a package of affordable housing structures and/or in community impact structures. And what does that mean? That means then that you have to do the work to make sure that you understand what the community needs are. You know, one of the things I tell faith leaders is that if your first foray into being a good community partner is going to be done through affordable housing, you are failing from the jump. Why are you failing from the jump? Because the work that you do as solution partners, being a part of the fabric of the community, understanding your community and making sure that you know the needs of your community are vital and important to making sure that you're creating what I call building and belonging. One of the things that a faith leader has to do is that they have to make sure that they are not just worshiping in their community, but they are working in their community. So that means that's right. So for example, my church is in Northeast Washington. It's off South Dakota Avenue. I always tell people, if you know where the McDonald's is, you know where my church is. We sit up on that hill. But you know what I've established is that it is important for me to be a part of what's happening in the community. So belonging. I belong to the North Michigan Park Civic Association. I belong to what's happening with the ANC commissions. I belong to other entities that are moving and other nonprofits that are moving in the area. Why do I do that? Because as I belong, I can help then to build the fabric. I can address the things. For an example, we had a young man who put up a tent on our property, and the community went crazy because they didn't want that homelessness coming over into North Michigan Park. And I had to remind them that he belongs here just like you belong here. The question is, what are we going to do to help him to move forward? The question is, because see, as a house of worship, I have, in a man of faith, I have the responsibility to bring healing and hope to people, not to evict them in the midst of pain and crisis. And so whether you're the congressman or the dude on the corner, you have to make sure that you're communicating in such a way that people can understand who they are and what they bring. See, I believe this. I believe this firmly. I don't care where you were born, how you were born, and when you were born. You were not born a mistake. You were not born a mistake. You were not born to live beneath your potential. You were born to live in purpose. And even though you might have what I call a situational crisis now, that is not the end of your story. And because it's not the end of your story, you have to make sure that you keep living each day so that you can finish out your story. And that is what we share. Our faith leaders. I have stories of faith leaders across the country. I'll give you one example. And I am watching the clock, Tom. I am watching the clock. I'll give you one example. So the work that our Mid-Atlantic market does, it covers the state of Maryland, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the District of Columbia. I have a pastor up in Baltimore City, who is building 84 units of mixed-use family affordable housing between 30 and 50% of the AMI. But because of the vacancy to value crisis that was happening in Baltimore City, they asked themselves, what can we do now while we're putting together this performer for this project here? So they decided to go and purchase the homes, to rehab them, and to sell them at the purchase price to first-time home buyers who walked in with equity for what they did. That's getting creative and doing the work. That's building and belonging. And so there's so much that we can do. But the key is maintaining your energy level. Look, what we do, let's don't hide it, as we just heard the secretary say it. It's draining. You're in the midst of dealing with an administration that does not care. They care about what they have decided that they wanted to do before they got elected. That is their priority. But guess what your priority is? Stop reading the headlines and start keeping your head up so that you can begin to help others to keep moving forward. I'm not saying being an ostrich and stick your head in the ground. I'm not saying to be oblivious to what's going on. Know what the laws and the legislations are doing, but at the same time, make sure that you're planning to do the right thing. And the next time you have an opportunity, when someone comes up to you and they need help, as you heard the secretary said, if the federal level is not going to do it, then the state level is going to have to do it. If the state level is not going to do it, then the local level is not going to do it. If the local level can't do it, then the grassroots folk got to do it. But somebody got to keep doing it and not give up while we're building and belonging. I need to stop.
I told you it was ready. Joe, that was fantastic. I really appreciate your being here, and I hope all of you were able to take as much from this as I was. Thank you, Joe.